Hi, welcome back to Long-Term Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about the Canik TP9 SFx and more specifically about some upgrades that I have made to this pistol. A little while ago, I made a review video on the Canik TP9 SFx, and in that video, the gun is mostly in its original factory configuration. When I did that video, I had added a brass backstrap and mag well from Taylor Freelance, and I'd also added the Talon grips, but the rest of the gun was as it came to me from the factory. That is no longer the case. I have upgraded a number of internals in the gun, and I just wanted to walk through exactly what those upgrades are, a little bit, talk a little bit about the results of those upgrades, how the gun performs now, and just review the changes that I've made. So let's go ahead and look at it. It's worth mentioning up front that just because I changed a part doesn't necessarily mean that everybody should change that part. I'm not an expert in gunsmithing or anything like that. And it's also worth mentioning that I have upgraded the pistol here for competition use. So I wouldn't really advocate making any of these upgrades to a gun that you're planning to use for carry or for self-defense, just because some of the changes that I've made do alter the safety systems of the gun and alter some of the springs involved in the safety systems, and I really wouldn't recommend doing that to a gun that's going to be actually carried or used for anything besides competition. So just getting that out of the way up front. The main things that I have changed on this particular gun are the sights, the trigger system, and then also the recoil system as well. So we're going to talk about those three kind of systems separately. So the first upgrade that I made was the sights. Now, in the last video, I mentioned that my particular specimen of the Canik TP9 SFx was having some point of impact, point of aim issues. And now I know that as soon as you say that the gun's not shooting where you aim, the comeback is, well, maybe you're bad at aiming, right? I had other people shoot it, and it was shooting consistently a little high, and that was repeatable between different users. So I wanted to upgrade the sights, and I figured that if I was going to change the sights, I might as well really go ahead and upgrade them. So what I opted for were the Dawson precision sights, and let's see if we can get a look here at those. So I went ahead and got fiber optic green in the back and a red fiber optic up front. Now, if you're looking at this, these sights might look a little strange because this front sight is quite tall. It's not really a true suppressor height sight, or at least that wasn't my intention. Dawson Precision sells some fixed sights for the Canik, but I figured that if I was going to upgrade the sights, I might as well go ahead and just really upgrade them and get some adjustable sights. So it turns out that on the TP9 SFx, the rear sight is cut for a Glock rear sight. So I bought a Glock rear sight from Dawson Precision that's adjustable and installed that, and then shot it with the factory front sight. And I called the company, and this was kind of the process that they recommended to figure out exactly what height front sight it was that I was going to need. After having taken some data at the range, and I was way off of zero because the front sight height was incorrect with the factory front sight, since this rear sight is so much taller. I took that data, went to Dawson Precision's website, plugged in the numbers in their front sight height calculator, and they spit out a front sight height that this gun would require. And the front sight is the M&P Smith & Wesson cut. So I just bought a Smith & Wesson front sight off of their website. For my particular gun, this worked out to be a .375 inch tall front sight. with the adjustable rear sight, and the adjustable rear sight has quite a bit of adjustment. I think if I depress this here, you can see like that's quite a bit of adjustment, and it's about at the middle of its adjustment. It'll adjust up about that same amount. So a front sight that's sort of in the ballpark will get you there with the adjustable rear sight. I have really liked these sights. I've run them in a competition since I put them on, since I installed them, and I was able to pretty consistently get hits on man-sized targets out to 50 yards, and I just was not able to do that before. Not so much because the sights initially were bad, but just because they weren't sighted exactly right on the particular gun that I had. The last thing to talk about with the sights is that as I was trying to install them myself, I did wrap the slide in masking tape to try to prevent marring it, and then when I peeled the masking tape off, got this this lovely battle-worn finish look. I'm a little less than thrilled about how that's turned out, and I probably could contact Canik about that and say, hey, my finish came off, but I just don't want to go through the hassle right now of getting the whole thing re-Cerakoted. So I haven't worried with it, and it doesn't impede the gun's function, which is mostly what I'm concerned about with this particular gun. So that's the changes that I made to the sighting system. On then to the trigger. Now, right off the bat, if you've looked at upgrading the trigger on your Canik TP9 SFx, you've probably heard of Freedom Smith triggers. And that is what I have put on this gun. It's a Freedom Smith trigger. So I'll go ahead and just show exactly how that functions here. And we are empty. I'm just confirming that for myself as much as for anyone else. So with this Freedom Smith trigger, it significantly reduces the over travel just by the way the trigger is cut up where it interfaces with the frame. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. So that is the over travel right there. I'm at the wall at this point. So out at the wall, pull a little bit further, and we break. Okay, and to reset. This is our reset, so we're still holding it in. That was the reset, and then it comes back just a shade from that, okay? So whole cycle again, we're all the way out, back to the wall, break, reset, and then we're back on the wall again. It just crisps up the trigger very nicely. Yeah, it takes a lot of that excess travel out of the trigger. So, big fan of the Freedom Smith trigger. This particular model is the Vanguard. Now, you know, I could have gone with a different model. This one was one that they had in stock. I like the color. The profile seemed kind of good. I did really like the flat face to the trigger. There's a little bit of a lip here at the very bottom that is that's nice, but it's a flat face overall, and I do like that quite a bit. I also liked how that there's these sort of a relief chamfer here on the edge that lets you really get your finger around to the trigger safety and make sure that you depress that every time. So I'm a fan of this particular profile. There's other really great profiles on their website too. I don't know that this is necessarily the best, but they had it in a color that I liked when I wanted to buy one, so I bought it. All right. The trigger isn't really the only thing that I've upgraded here, though. I've upgraded some of the internals as well, and so I'm going to take the gun apart, and we'll talk through what internals I upgraded also. So just go ahead and take it down. We're going to set the slide aside for a moment and look here at our fire control unit. So right off the bat, in addition to swapping out the trigger, I did swap out this trigger return spring right here. It's the little fella that's stretching when I pull the trigger back. For the trigger return spring, I used a Sprinco Canik trigger return spring. I just bought that straight from Sprinco, and I think that lightened the trigger up some. That does have an effect on the trigger pull. That's really all the changes that I made to the frame portion of the trigger. The other big change that I made, though, that's worth mentioning is within the slide. And so inside of the slide, there is this little fella right here. It's a little safety plunger. And if you press that in, the action bar right here that the trigger is connected to. Let's see if I can get that. Yeah, these little notches here, as you pull the trigger back, they push that safety plunger up. And what that safety plunger is doing is preventing the firing pin from coming forwards without the trigger being depressed, without this safety plunger being depressed. The spring behind this plunger in the stock Canik TP9 SFx is stout. Really, most of the springs in this gun are very stout. So since this plunger gets depressed as you pull the trigger back, you're having to push against whatever spring is behind this plunger. I went ahead and replaced the spring behind this plunger and used a Ghost reduced power firing pin safety plunger spring. It's a spring that's intended for a Glock. It works just fine. But I did go ahead and swap that spring out. That makes this plunger move much more easily, which means that you don't have to use as much force pulling the trigger back to move that plunger up. Again, let me go ahead and stress that this is not a modification I would make on a gun that I plan to carry, because you're getting into the territory here of modifying features that are intended to be safety features, and if there's anything that goes wrong, you stand to incur some liability issues from that. But I'm only using this gun in a competitive environment, and so it's a thing that I feel comfortable doing in that setting. Wouldn't do it if I were planning to carry this gun every day or even daily at all, right? It's really only loaded when it's at the range. So that's all the upgrades to the fire control unit, to the trigger and the fire control. Overall, those upgrades, the trigger return spring and the plunger safety spring, swapping those out did drop my trigger pull down to about 3 to 3.25 pounds. So it's significantly lighter than how it comes from the factory. The Freedom Smith trigger may reduce the pull weight some, although I don't think that it does. I think that pull weight reduction is largely the trigger return spring and the reduced power plunger safety spring. So swapping those two out got me down to a 3 to 3.25 pound trigger pull. That's perfectly nice for me. It's perfectly crisp. I don't have to think about working the trigger. It just works when I want it to. I've really liked that particular feature. Okay, last thing to talk about, the last system that I upgraded on this gun is the recoil system. Now, the recoil system is completely inside of the slide, and there's two parts that you have to upgrade if you're going to upgrade the recoil system. So the first thing that you're going to want to upgrade is the recoil spring assembly. In the stock configuration, that is a captive spring on a guide rod. What I have done is swapped that out for a tungsten guide rod to add a little bit of non-reciprocating mass, because the slide moves, but the guide rod does not. And then I also have added an aftermarket spring as well. It is not captive. I'll take that apart in just a second. Because of the way that this gun functions, the recoil spring here actually provides the force to cock the striker spring. So as the slide recoils back, and then as it recoils back, on the forward stroke, when this recoil spring is pushing the slide back into battery forwards, this striker catches on your fire control unit and is pulled back towards the rear of the gun, cocking the gun. What this means is that if your recoil spring is not powerful enough to actually cock your striker spring, your gun's not going to go into battery. You're going to start to have problems, okay? So anytime you start to reduce the power of your recoil spring, you're probably going to need to reduce the power of your striker spring as well. Now, like most of the springs on this gun, the striker spring that it comes with from the factory is stout. Now, that's good. It prevents you from having light strikes or miss strikes. If you've got primers that are a little cantankerous and they're not wanting to work, having a stronger striker spring can be good. I'm planning to run ammo that I have bought just to compete with, and I don't really anticipate that being a problem, so I did go ahead and reduce the power of the striker spring as well. So the striker spring that I used is the Ghost 6.5 pound Glock striker spring, and swapping that out is this really as simple as popping this back plate off and then just pulling the spring out. There's videos on how to do that. I'm not going to go into that here, but it's not a complicated process to swap out that spring. But I use the Ghost 6.5 pound Glock striker spring. For the recoil assembly itself, I've got a tungsten guide rod, and this adds quite a little bit of additional heft. I'll post here. I don't remember what the exact weight of it is. I'll post that. It'll show up here in the video on the screen. But it is the W74 tungsten guide rod, and that's basically what this company does. They make tungsten guide rods for Caniks. So I bought this straight from them. I've really liked it. It adds a little bit more mass out towards the front of the gun, kind of balances out the brass back strap and mag well that I've got on it. But it also does help a little bit with preventing some muzzle flip by having more weight out towards the muzzle, which increases the moment of inertia of the pistol, using all these $10 college words. So the spring that I've got here is the Wolff 14-pound Commander spring, and that's Wolff with 2 Fs. If you buy this spring, just make sure that you're getting the Commander length spring. If they sell different lengths of springs or different sizes of springs, but you want the Commander size, like for the Colt Commander, the 1911. But it's a 14-pound Commander size spring. When you install this, I've read, and it does seem to be true to me as well, that putting the end of the spring that's got the coils kind of pushed together towards the flared end of the guide rod, it gives you the best results. And overall, this thing just slides right into here. And then you can just install it all back onto the slide. Now, I have heard and read that a 13-pound recoil spring will work as well, and I actually have one of those. I just don't have it installed on the gun because I was planning to run it in a competition pretty soon after I got all these parts in and put it together, and I knew that the recoil spring it came with was stiffer than 14 pounds for sure, and I didn't have time to really test it out and make sure the 13-pound would work reliably. I've read that it has, or that it does work reliably. I just hadn't verified that myself, but I plan to, and so just take that for what it's worth. I know that the 14-pounder does function reliably with the ammunition that I'm using, which is Federal Syntech 150 grain ammo out of this pistol. With all of these upgrades, the gun does perform very well. I'm really thrilled with its performance, and those upgrades have made a significant impact to the gun's performance. The recoil is incredibly manageable. There is less muzzle flip than how it came from the factory between the weight upgrades that I've made and just reducing the power of the recoil spring assembly. So I do like that. I can basically just line it up on a target and pull the trigger twice and know that both of those shots are pretty well going to be hits. I've really enjoyed using the Dawson precision sights. They're very crisp. They show up well against targets. The fiber optics are pretty long compared to some other sights, which does give them a little bit better light gathering, in my opinion. But I have really liked those sights, and the Freedom Smith trigger and the spring upgrades that I've made have just done wonders for what is already a phenomenal trigger system in the Canik TP9 SFx. But it does make this trigger very crisp, reasonably light, very comfortable to use, and almost like just an extension of your finger, or at least for me, an extension of my finger, where I just think that it's time for the gun to go off, and it goes. So overall, I'm thrilled with the upgrades. I would do them all again in a heartbeat on this gun, and that's pretty much it. If you have questions or comments, or if you have tried different upgrades and you like any of those better, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like content like this. But that is my review of the upgrades that I've made on the Canik TP9 SFx. Thanks for watching.